About a year ago, I was sent a message asking me why I'm an atheist, and I waited a really long time to respond because I may not have been sure myself. Um, and I got the same question on my ask, and I kind of went into talking about how I don't believe in Christianity because, especially fundamentalist Christianity, because that can be proven false. But um, it's different to ask someone why they don't believe in God. It's not the same as saying, why do you believe God is not real? Which I try not to do in a formal setting like a YouTube video. But, so, this is what I said. No current, credible, scientific insight has ever demonstrated that a god or gods are necessary for the universe to function in the complex ways it does and the ways we understand it does. Now, that's a really fancy definition, but I guess what I'm trying to say is that you need to be able to prove that a God must exist in order for the universe to exist, if that's the claim you make. If you say there's a God and he created the universe, you need to say, well, a universe wouldn't exist without a God, and so far that has not been proven. People have asserted it, but that's way different than being able to prove it. Now, when someone identifies as an atheist, they're really just saying, I couldn't find another religion that suits my beliefs. It's kind of like not rooting for a sports team in a way. Like, there's lots of different sports teams, there's lots of different religions, and you're kind of separating yourself from that. So I'm going to talk about why I don't believe in certain types of beliefs. And there's two things called deism and pantheism that, in the mind of Christopher Hitchens, are watered down atheists. And so deism is the belief that God acts in has some sort of personal role in nature. And that's the evidence for God. The intricacy and the abstract things that we don't understand about nature serve as evidence for God, which just isn't the case. And that was once a position I held. And pantheism, of course, is the idea that there's some sort of outside form of intelligence that our universe was based off of, and because of the idea that information couldn't have just popped into existence, but that might not be the case, and there's a whole number of things you would need to prove in order to prove that that is the case. You would need to prove that, 1, the universe came from nothing, 2, information can't come from nothing. You would also need to prove that. And the list goes on and on. So I tend to avoid forms of thinking that involve asserting something and then just sticking with it because it seems like it could be true. That makes it indistinguishable from stuff that people just pull out of their butt. And I think there's a fundamental problem with organized religion, which is why more and more people are separating themselves from them. The biggest problem is that, let's pretend by the slimmest probability, there really was a God, and let's say just Christianity, because that's what I happen to know most about. There really was a God. He really did send his son down. The son really did die in the sake of his father's name, and he really did rise from the dead. All that's great and dandy, but it's very extremely vulnerable to translators and people who wrote it down to slip their own dogmatic or convoluted beliefs. Like, let's pretend some translator out there was homophobic, and he slipped his homophobic beliefs into his translation of the Bible. That makes it extremely dishonest. It's sort of like the game of telephone. It starts out as a simple message and turns into this more and more complex and further from what it originally was. And that's a big fundamental problem with believing in those types of religions. And I think that anyone who refuses to recognize that that could possibly be the case, that it's possible translators weren't completely honest, that it's possible the scribes who originally wrote it down weren't completely honest, are really just deluding themselves further into what they believed since birth. And let's go one step further to say the entire story was made up by scribes and translators who weren't honest. So even if you say, well, some of it's true, and we know some of it's true, it's not necessarily the case. And if a whole classroom full of kids, or a whole gymnasium full of kids, are playing the game telephone, I'm willing to bet all my money on the fact that whatever the kid at the end says is going to be completely different than whatever the kid at the front says. And I think that that's what we should recognize about these Bronze Age texts, is that they really just need to be abandoned entirely, and we need to look to other forms of morality. Without the cosmic justice system, if you don't believe in this, you burn in hell. Without the, homophobia, without the stoning women, without the scientific inaccuracies, just get rid of all that. There's no use for it. So I guess there's my haphazardly cluster of clips thrown together to explain why I'm an atheist. Go ahead and check out my channel if you enjoyed this video at all. Rate it, like it, don't like it, I don't care. And leave a comment, hate comment, leave a whatever comment you want, because after all, it gives me more money. So you're the best.